Right, hello again. Today we're going to be looking at two of the variable types in Solidity. They're pretty similar, like I said, it's very similar to other programming languages. So we're going to be looking at integers and Booleans, or more specifically uints, which are unassigned integers. So just to declare it like usual, we go uint and then say public because we want it to be publicly accessed. Give it a name, we'll just call it my integer. And I'm not going to set it to anything right now. So the reason why I'm not doing that is because by default, with Solidity, then if you do not put a value into a variable such as an integer, then it doesn't assign it as undefined or null. What it actually does is it just sets it as its default value. So integers become 0. A boolean is defaultly set at false. I believe a string will be just an empty string. So if we compile this and then deploy it, I'm going to get rid of these here. So just deploying it here. As you can see, default gives it 0, but we can set a function. So as you might normally expect, you just call the function again. We'll make it give it a name, increase integer. And that will take in, so it's going to take in an integer, it's going to take in an unassigned integer, and then this here is kind of what we're calling the user input. So the user will just call it new integer, make that public. And if we then set, so my integer, which is the integer we've declared outside it, we can then set that equal to the new integer. And let's have a look at what happens when we compile this and then deploy this contract. So it's boom, getting clear of the old stuff. Right now, by the way, I'm not using the injected Web3 MetaMask thing environment. I'm using this JavaScript, just virtual machine one. It's a lot quicker. It doesn't take time, so we can just deploy it straight away. And as you see, in an instant, it's been deployed. So by default, our integer is 0, as you can see over there, and then we can now put in a, so I've just called that increase. Let's call it, realistically, I'll call it change. Increase will be what we're doing after this. So let's say that's 1, 2, 5, boom, and then now the integer has changed to 125. So this argument inside the function, the first part is just saying, okay, right, the argument is an integer or an unassigned integer, and it's going to be called new integer. Right, so let's change the function a bit now. We'll make it so that it actually does something similar to what it's called, increase integer. So all we do with that, very similar syntax to do as with other stuff, just do a plus plus. I'm sure this here will also work, and I'm sure that will also work. I'll double check it after this, but for now we'll just do my integer plus plus. Let's run it, deploy. Oh no, it's the same one. Okay, so compile it first. We don't need any arguments for this function, of course, because it's just, we don't need it to input anything essentially. So okay, if we deploy it now, this should be the most recent one. My integer 0, increase integer, and now it's become 1. If we make it a decrease integer function, now this here is good to understand. So obviously just go minus minus, boom. Okay, compile it. Let's deploy it now. So we start off with 0. If we decrease it, it doesn't become -1. So because we're dealing with, by default, I assume it accounts it as a integer of 256 bytes, or I think it's 256 bytes. Basically, it's a number that's 2 to the power of 256. Now, if we have this, if we set the integer to be a uint 8 with just 8 bytes, then and we deploy that, then when we decrease it, again, it will start with 0 because we haven't set it to anything. When we decrease it, however, it goes to 255. which is 0 minus 1, and it's 256, or 2 to the power of 8. There's 256 possible numbers. So yeah, it's worth noting that when you decrease a number from 0, it does not go to -1. It then kind of goes to the very last possible number that it can be. Okay. So just quickly, I'm just going to look and see if by doing this here, we get the same result. Close out on deploy. 1 to 0, decrease. There we go, 255. And if we have it like this, another similar way of writing stuff. Deploy 0, decrease it, 255. There we go. So yeah, we can write it in a multitude of different ways. Now we're going to look at Booleans. So to define that, we just call it just by saying bool, and then if make it public, and we'll just call it my Boolean. Now by default, it sets it as false. I can show you by doing that now. So if we deploy this, my Boolean will be false, and we can again create another function change Boolean. That there will take arguments in. It will take a Boolean, and then the altered Boolean, make it public. Actually, I'm just going to show you what happens when you don't make it public. Then we have my Boolean equals altered Boolean. So if we go to compile that, well, I mean, it just doesn't even run it. Okay. Compile it now. Deploy, boom. All right, so we've got our my Boolean is called false. Change Boolean, we'll change it to true. Now Boolean's true. So if we don't put the public before there, before the my Boolean here, and we compile that, as you can see, Boolean doesn't come up. So I'm assuming by changing it here, we'll still change the actual Boolean. We just cannot see what the Boolean value is in the public eye. But that's pretty much it for today's episode. Just going through the basics of firstly integers and secondly Booleans, and we'll go into strings. And also there's a special type of variable in Solidity, which is called a address variable. And obviously that there is just the address of a user. So yeah, it's pretty unique to Solidity. We'll cover that in the next topic.